Today on Free Field Training, we're going to be talking about filling out government forms, specifically forms like this, gang contact card type of forms. These are the easiest forms that we fill out in law enforcement, security, EMS, those types of things. It's just we made contact with somebody out on the street, and we're going to document that in a way that's easy for entry later, and also so that we can say we met with this person at this time at this place. Here was the description, here's who they were with, here's the vehicles that they were driving, those types of things, not just for statistical purposes, but for connecting together people to crimes to vehicles later on. It's one of the high-level law enforcement things that is one of the first things that we teach people because it's a great investigative tool. In the process of doing this, I want to tell you about generally filling out government forms, some things that you should know and some things you should be aware of when you're doing them, and some of the common foibles of filling out government forms. Now I'm going to do the classic foible of filling out government forms, and for the interest of clarity so that you can see easier on my whiteboard here, we're going to fill them out with blue ink so you can see the difference between what is written on there and what I am writing as I'm talking with all of you. Generally speaking, everyone would tell you to write with black ink. One of the advantages of using blue when you're filling out a form, especially when you're signing something and putting your star number on it, is that blue makes it easier to tell what is the copy and what is the original, because when you copy something on a copy machine, it's going to come out all black and white, unless you're in one of those nice places, and I don't know anything about that. So we're going to do it in blue, as a true professional would, someone who has way more whiskers than everybody else on their shift. We're going to fill it all out in blue so we can tell that this is our original later on down the road. So starting off, we need to talk not just about what these boxes are and how to properly fill them out, but talk about the difference between a complete form and an incomplete form. And this is something we run into with brand new people all the time. They don't understand the difference between a form that is complete and a form that is not complete. For that purpose, there's a couple methodologies that we use. One is top to bottom, left to right. You've heard me talk about that on the channel before. When we fill out these boxes, when we fill out any form, we're going to start at the upper left-hand corner, we're going to go to the lower right-hand corner as best as we can. Now with modern computer technology, we're having trouble doing that anymore because we're having to use reference numbers that we wouldn't have had to use even 5 years ago to reference things back and forth. And we're having a transitional phase in law enforcement where things that we're making on paper that used to be kept on paper and then entered into computers later, or sometimes being entered into a computer system while this is being filled out, and then you have to reference the computer system to the form. Instead of it being a one-way flow of information, we're getting two-way flows of information. And sometimes we're having three-way flows of information where there's a bound book, the computer system, and then the card form that we still have to fill out. But as best we can, top to bottom, left to right. And also we're going to want, when we're doing these, especially in paper, we're going to want all of these boxes to be filled. And there's a simple reason behind that. If every box is filled, then the person that's doing the data entry for this form or is looking at it later on is going to know that none of this was left blank accidentally or because we didn't have the information at the time. And for those reasons, we're going to start off with the name, and I'm going to give you a couple of different options when we have name for our contact card. If we know the name, we're going to fill the name out there, right? So we're going to do Doe John B. John B. Doe, right? Last name, first name, middle initial. Unless the form tells us otherwise, that's how we're going to fill the name out. But what if we have a description of the person that we came into contact with, but then they bolted and we still have to fill out our contact card? Well, we are going to do... We're not going to leave this blank. We're going to put unknown, or UNK, in this box. This tells the person that reads the form that we didn't forget to fill the box out with the name. We didn't forget what the name was. The name is unknown at this time. Moving down further, we have vehicle information on here. We get all this filled out and we say, oh, the vehicle information. Well, they weren't in a vehicle. So for this, what we're going to want to do is put a line in every box having to do with the vehicle information, a diagonal line. Alternatively, we could put N/A. Now, N/A, or not applicable, or putting a line through, means something entirely different than writing unknown. Oftentimes people confuse these two things. They'll write unknown when in fact it's N/A. They'll put a line through it when it's just unknown, or they'll put N/A when it should be unknown. These mean very different things. Unknown means it exists and we think it exists, but we don't know what it is. Not applicable means it doesn't apply to this situation. And a line through it means very similar to it doesn't apply in this situation. John B. Doe. We stopped John B. Doe, and for whatever reason, we think he's involved in some sort of criminal activity, or we just want to document that at 4 o'clock in the morning, this guy was hanging out with absolutely no reason in front of the closed U-Haul and peeing behind a garbage can, or whatever he was doing. We want to document that he was at a specific location at a specific time, or was with different specific people, or he was at a location at a time wearing gang identifying information, or was caught doing so, spray painting a wall, but no one owns the wall. So like he's tagging whatever, a king killer on the wall, and that wall isn't necessarily owned by anybody. It's not something that we're going to be able to arrest him for, but we want to document on a gang contact card that he was doing this activity. So later on down the road, when we come in contact with John B. Doe, we know that he has a history of gang activity, and we can document that later down the road. Now also, sometimes when you later catch someone doing something, if you can positively identify to the state's attorney's office, to the prosecutors, to the judge, everybody else, that he definitely was involved in gang activity, it can be an enhancer for punishments later on down the road, a sentence enhancer, or a sentencing enhancer. Sometimes it can be a charge enhancer. You can go from a class 3 to a class 2 felony, go up 1 level or 2 levels of felony or misdemeanor, because you know that they have prior gang contacts, prior gang activity, especially if you can tie that offense in with the gang information. So John B. Doe and then date. Now when we make a date, when we put a date on any form, we are going to do it in day, month, year format. So we're going to use 1 January 24. Boy, did I have fun on 1 January 24. I wish I could tell you guys about it. Anyway, 1 January 24, we made contact with John B. Doe. We're going to write it as 1 in a way where no one can confuse that that's definitely a 1 and not an I. 1 JAN 24. And the reason that we do this is because different people will use different formats for dates. Sometimes you'll get confusion about which one the month is and which one the day is. Sometimes people will want different formats to enter into the computer system. If we do it like this, everybody knows which one the year was, which one the month was, and which one the day is. It makes it very simple for people later on down the road. We'll see an example over here for date of birth, where very often on forms, you'll know they want date of birth in month, day, year format for entry, because they'll put 2 little slash marks on date of birth. Incident number. Now this is going to be a number that is normally generated by computer, and that's what I was talking about with sometimes having to get the information from the computer to put onto the paper form instead of vice versa. This is the back feed of information onto the form. So here's our incident number. We called it in a dispatch. We're stopping some guy outside of the liquor store at 123 Fake Street, and they're going to issue us incident number at the end of that incident, 24-00031, which means we're the 31st incident of the year in our system. Now we're going to have our address. So in this case, for a contact card, address is normally going to mean the address that something happened at. But if we read the form and completely before we go, we notice location of stop over here, which tells us that this is going to be John B. Doe's address. And you notice for address, they're telling us they want the number, then they want the street, and then they prompt us for an apartment number. Why do they prompt us for an apartment number? It's because a lot of people forget to ask the person they're talking to about having an apartment number. So what we end up with is 328 John Street. And when the detectives get there in 6 months down the road to go track down John B. Doe for something else that's unrelated to this, and this is the best address they have, they get there and they find out it's an apartment building with 25 units. So we're going to put in our address as 124 Joe Street, apartment 2B. Ta-da! Now we know exactly where they live. We're going to say they live in Chicago. Because that is where everyone claims to live when you stop them, and they don't want you to know where they actually reside. They always use mom or dad's house or their old address in Chicago, regardless of where they live, at least around me. I'm sure that's pretty common with other big major metropolitan areas. Location of the stop, we're going to do 123 Fake Ave. And here we run into the first problem, big problem that we get to with paper forms, and that is running out of space on the form to actually fill the stuff out that we want to put on there. Now this is fine if we're working patrol in the town and we're stopping somebody in our town at an address that is known to us. However, if we are working on a task force assignment or we are leaving town for something else, assisting another agency, something like that, now we have to fit the entire address of whoever we stop them inside this little tiny box where normally we'd have a big box. Now that's not a big deal on this form, but on this form, that's really, really, really small boxes to put that information on. Next, we got phone number. So most people are not going to give us a phone number when we stop them and pat them down outside the abandoned liquor store at 3 o'clock in the morning, pissing behind the garbage can. But if they do give us a phone number, we can put it in here. 312-588-2300. The old Empire carpet phone number from the commercials. And now we're going to put a phone number in there. One thing that detectives are going to tell you that are very important to their investigations later on down the road is if you can get a separate phone number for a person. If you tell them, hey, we'd love to be able to make contact with you in the future, let's say you feign that this stop was for their benefit for whatever reason, you can write a second phone number in there and they want you to. Most detectives, they are more than happy to get two phone numbers on the card. Now this is limited by how much space we have on the card, but we'll get to things that limit those sizes later on down the road. The beat is going to be whatever beat you are in. Let's say we're in beat 204 today. And then we've got description. So for description, especially with paper forms, lots of these forms were printed about 50 years ago and haven't really changed since then too much. So these all mean exactly what they say. This we're going to put male, female, unknown, not applicable, whatever it is, that's what we're going to put on there. We're going to use the actual terminology for that. Normally we're going to use what's on someone's driver's license. If we are stopping them and we're running their name, we're going to put what's on their driver's license on there. So John Doe, we're going to put male. We could put female. We could put unknown if we don't know what their sex was. Let's say we go to stop them, they take off, they're covered head to toe, it's middle of winter. We can put unknown if we didn't know. We're going to put race. We're going to use our nomenclature from it that we generally use from the computer system. If we already know what the nomenclature is from the computer system, use the same nomenclature so you're not getting nasty grams from records or from the help desk or whatever else is trying to enter this stuff later on down the road. So we're going to male, white, age, let's say 22. Now we're going to see how bad I am at math. Born 01 of 2001, right? Would that make him 22? I don't know. Let me know in the comments section whether that would make him 22. Let's say he's like me. He's a little manlet, and so he's 5'2" and he's 200 pounds. Eye color, we're going to go with green, GRN, and hair color blonde, BLN. If you have standardized nomenclature for your driver's license in your state and you don't have standardized nomenclature for the computer system, use the driver's license nomenclature. If the driver's license uses BLK for black hair, use BLK for black on this. It's going to make your life a lot easier down the road. Here's another example of incidents where we have problems with being able to have enough space to put all of the info that we want onto the form. Vehicles, color. So we're going to use BLK. Let's say it was a black 2001. Bought it the year he was born. Make Jeep, right? If you don't have standardized classifications for cars in your state, and a lot of states don't anymore, you can try to write the whole thing out. I imagine writing some of them are easier than others, but model is normally when you get into trouble. Because if you're trying to go with a specific model, the model names of cars have gotten huge. If it was a Mercedes E190, it's pretty easy. But if it is a Jeep Grand Cherokee and you've got a box that's like a 1/4 inch by a 1/2 inch, you're going to have to be writing really small to get that in there. Style. With style, we're not looking for an opinion on the style of the car. This isn't where you're going to write beater. This isn't, if there's a thing that says vehicle description, it's a blank line like we have down here with remarks. You can write beater. But for here, what you're looking for is something that can't be misconstrued later on down the road. You're looking for SUV, pickup, or the number of doors that the vehicle has. So if it was a Toyota Tundra, I would write pickup truck. If it's a Jeep Grand Cherokee, I would write SUV. If it was a old Toyota Celica, I would write 2-door. And if it was a Ford Taurus, I would write 4-door. License number, we'll give the old ABC 123, the most run license plate in the state of Illinois. License state is going to be Illinois, and license year, because they always ask, but I don't know why they ask, because now we could just run it if we really wanted to know what the license year was. It's on there. The year was 24. I think that this might be a holdover from when you had plates that were issued for a particular year, and so you could then go find the car that had the expired plate on it. But now with stickers and people gunning stickers off, stealing stickers, it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. And that's how we're going to fill the boxes out. Now note the different ways to tell you what information they wanted in each box. Up here we've got name, and that's inside that whole box, date inside the whole box. Over here we've got address, and then descriptions of what they want on a line under the address. These are well-made forms. Not all forms are going to be as well-made as these. Oftentimes you're not going to have cool like description, and then it's the description of the person, vehicle, description of the vehicle type of thing. If you don't and you have questions, make sure you reach out to a supervisor or one of the records clerks, because they're going to be your best source for figuring out what information they want filled out in each of these boxes and how. Reach out to somebody and ask them before you just do it wrong for 20 years because nobody told you otherwise. Down here, you're going to have driver or passenger. That's basically asking, was John B. Doe the driver of this car or the passenger of the car? Let's say they were the driver. Check marks work. X's work for little boxes. Filling the whole box out works. Very often, you're going to have whole lines, especially if there's some sort of offense. Let's say you're doing a warning ticket of some kind, and you're going to have a whole line of different offenses and boxes you can check. X's, check marks, squiggle it in. Where you get into trouble is if you do this and then you want to switch it over to the other one. That's when you're still pulling out the white out to white that box out. Because I'll tell you, if you put an X there and you go, oh no, that guy was the passenger, and then you're, like trying to color this one in and then check mark this one and then putting an arrow to that one and stuff like that, you're going to confuse somebody in records that's being paid minimum wage and doesn't really care that much. So make sure when you fill these out, just fill in the box, make sure what you're filling in is the right thing that you intend on filling in. And you're going to save yourself a lot of heartache and pain down the road. So let's say John was the driver. And this is the minimum amount of information that we're going to be having on the gang contact card or contact cards for a street stop. From there, you've got what other things can you do? Remarks. And my classic remark always with these is, I like cake. It really upsets our evidence technician, but as you can tell by my physique, I do like cake. So I like cake in remarks, especially if I think that it's not really going anywhere. But realistically, the remarks are to tell the person who gets this card why this person was being stopped. So if we have a person that we stopped for pissing behind the garbage can at the liquor store, we can write public indecency. That's how we came into contact with them. And then when somebody gets this card and as they're going through and trying to figure out what's going on, well, we can find out more about this. We can look up this incident number. It'll give the comments on the call, whether somebody called about the public indecency or whether we rolled up on the person, depending on how the car was opened. They could pull the body camera video from this incident, and they can also pull the dispatch information and what was said over the radio when I stopped the person. Down here, we're going to want to sign, and of course our signature is going to be super legible. And then we put our star number and we put it actually legible so when people have questions down the road, they can send us a message on, whatever interdepartmental system that we're getting messages on. Most places used to have email. Now we're getting them through the CAD system. Now down here, if you haven't noticed yet, it says use reverse for additional. So if there's more information, let's say we've got more remarks, right? Public indecency. And then we're going to draw an arrow down to use reverse for more information. So they know there's more comments on the back. So they look at the front of the card and they go, oh, what's going on? Oh, and now we can write a whole narrative on the back of the card if we really want to, explaining what went on, why we stopped them, why nothing was done with it. So when you get the contact card, they can read about it without having to dig. Or we can say, for remarks down here, put an arrow down to it, flip it over, public urination outside of liquor store, see body camera footage, or see dispatch information, whatever, see CAD call. So that way people know when they read the card where to go and look back. And that's part of that modern checking back and forth system that we have to do with computers and the paper copies right now. Another thing that you can write for remarks would be to write body-worn camera activated. So we'll erase this off. If you want to put remarks and you want to make life real easy for yourself, BWC active. So then anybody that reads this can be like, oh, yeah, and it's a body-worn camera incident. That means you had your body camera on and it was running during the incident. And then if they have questions related to the contact card, remarks, boom, body-worn camera activated. A lot of places that I've seen recently have been putting that at the top. You'll put it over at the top or the bottom. Body-worn camera incident, or they'll put it field contact card, and they'll write it down by whatever the title of it is they'll put body-worn camera incident, or body-worn camera accident, or they'll just put BWC with asterisks next to it to tell everybody that there was a body camera on during it. If you're stopping people at 3 o'clock in the morning for public urination outside the closed liquor store on the 1st of January at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're only incident number 31 for the 1st of January at 2 o'clock in the morning, you should check out Officer Privacy. They're the sponsor of this video. There's going to be a little QR code right here for you to check out. Officer Privacy is a service that takes your information off of the internet. So the person that you stopped for public urination at 2 o'clock in the morning, did a contact card on, and was very angry when they walked away that they weren't arrested or done something with, you can make sure that they can't come return the favor at 2 o'clock in the morning at your house. I have Officer Privacy, and I was so happy with the service that I got it from my wife. It was a very good service. It took me off of all the common people search websites. Check out that link. There's also going to be a link down in the description down below. Now we're going to go to all of the Instagram comments and questions. We're going to do the little Patreon exit, and then the comments and questions will be directly after that. So I'll stick around for that, and I'll see you guys next time. That's been your free field training for today. While you're here, check out one of the other videos that we made, or down here, subscribe so you can see more. Or you could check out Patreon, where you can see how you can get your name put on the videos, like all these fine folks over here. I'll see you guys next time. This is very, very simple stuff that you'd be surprised how often people mess up when we get them brand new. They don't know how to fill out a government form, especially younger people now. Guys in their 20s are coming in, they've never had to really fill out a paper form before, because even most colleges are going to electronic systems for most of your admission stuff and everywhere you're going to get financial aid. Parker 2015 says, what report/CAD system do you guys currently use? We're currently using Spillman. Spillman is a kind of an all-in-one CAD system, report writing system that allows us to dispatch out. I like that it allows me to put myself on a call, and all the numbers refer back to each other. The database networks for Spillman are very powerful. You can get insight returns, which means that if I run John B. Doe 11 of 01, I can run him not just for my town, our local CAD system, but everybody else that's linked in with us. And that's really useful. Like 2 states away, I can find out that, John B. Doe was also urinating behind the garbage can at another liquor store at 2 o'clock in the morning. And maybe that makes the difference in the decision of whether or not to cite John or just let him go. It's powerful systems. The difference with it is when you go to it to start with, it's completely unpopulated. So Spillman starts as unpopulated, with incident number 1 for the year, and it also starts unpopulated when you first start the system with name number 1, and you have to add names. So when we first got Spillman, we didn't like it very much because there wasn't a lot of information in there for us to work with. It was a lot of adding names. But later down the road, it got to the point where I could search John B. Doe 1101. John would come up, I could add him to my report, and then I could click on involvements, and I could see every contact we had had with John B. Doe ever. And then now we're probably 12 years into using the Spillman system, and it's been a godsend. Like, there's very rarely do I have to actually enter a name when we're dealing with like domestics at 2 o'clock in the morning. People, we get somebody there, if they're not in the system, we're like, "Whoa, you moved to town recently?" Like, "Oh yeah, I moved here a year ago." Okay, well, now you're in the system. Now it's going to be easier. So it made report writing a lot shorter. When we first started on Spillman, every report was taking an hour. You had to add all the information all the time. Now I've got it down to like 10 minutes. I just click and slide information over. It's actually a really useful system. And it's also what we use to send messages back and forth. You know, records will send me a message. "Hey, we lost this 1050, or you never did this, you never did this 1050, this motor vehicle collision," and then we can go back and forth and figure out where it's at and why it's not done and why they can't find it, that type of stuff. Restart my cameras here. I didn't like Spillman when we first got it, but it's become a very powerful resource and I really enjoy it now. At least I enjoy the database features of it. Parker says, we have Spillman as well. Do you use the mobile version? We do use mobile. We have Flex. So I get to use it straight from the car. And that's one of the great aspects of Spillman, is that I can add myself to a call. So if dispatch puts a call up on the board, we're not all talking over the radio on top of each other. Information isn't not coming out because everybody's trying to get on the air at the same time. If there's a hot call that comes in, we get, shots fired with the victim, 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to get on the air and be like, "Oh, add me." I can just put myself on the call. Or I can just assign myself to something. If nobody's assigned to the call yet, I can assign myself to the call, go to it, clear it, have never had to get on the radio. It's really useful, really powerful tools. Bubby442 says, "Are these contact cards seen more at city agencies working for a sheriff's department? I've never heard of these." Okay, so a lot of this stuff has been superseded by technology, but a lot of the things that we're talking about have not been superseded by technology. I'll give you an example from our own system working with Spillman. I can have an incident where I don't do a report, but I can add a name to our electronic card. When we open a call, let's say, "Hey, I'm going to be down at the closed up liquor store on Main Street, and with a guy looks like he's urinating behind the garbage can." They're going to put me down on that call. They're going to open a card, which was literally back in the day a card, but they open an electronic card and they assign it a number. It used to be you would take the card and punch it in a machine. Well, now it electronically adds a card. So the same thing we can do with a contact card, we can do with the card on the computer system. And we can add a person, we can add a vehicle, and we can put comments onto that incident so that we're creating that information without the need for extra data entry. These cards still exist, and a lot of agencies is a backup to the electronic system. And very often the information that's put on the cards also has to be put into the electronic system. These are very useful for gang investigations, and sometimes you have to have physical paperwork to keep track of certain things for some investigations. They're not really popular anymore, but they do exist out there. This is something that my agency still uses, and I like to use, and it's also a great entry point to teaching people about how to fill out government forms without screwing it up. And anytime I can point someone to a video instead of having to sit here and blow my voice out teaching 25 people a year how to do this, the better. El Negro Chapo says, "Can you explain the forms that are required to be given to domestic violence victims?" I will put a copy of one on here so you can kind of see what it is. In Illinois, we have what's called the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. On the front, it's in English. On the back, it's in Spanish. There's other versions that are out there in Mandarin and a couple other languages, but where I'm at, we're only really using the English and Spanish ones, so we put them back to back, so I only have the one form. I normally keep them in my vest carrier. It's one of the things that I pull out in the vest carrier videos all the time. Like, "Oh, I got all this paperwork." That's one of the things that I pull out. We put our name and star number on there. There's a little box for name and star number. I always put incident number on there too, just so that there's a way for people to reference back to it. And that outlines all of the rights of the victim and the responsibilities of the police and the prosecutors and all of that, given domestic situations. Very often this can run people in circles because they think that they're going to be able to go back and prosecute for something where I'm writing on a report, there's no probable cause, and explaining why there wasn't probable cause for an arrest. But it outlines it so that if somebody in my position, if a cop does the wrong thing, and there's good documentary evidence that they were doing the wrong thing. They were just being lazy. It gives that person phone numbers and procedures in which they can go back and fix that laziness and make sure that they can get help and they can get the person prosecuted. The form is easy. The form is easy. I write my name and star number on it and the incident number, and I hand it to them and I go, here you go. This is the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. It outlines your rights and our responsibilities in situations such as this. I highly recommend you read it. Now, before we leave, do you want to gather some things and leave before the idiot comes back or before this escalates, so that way I don't have to come back here for multiple calls. I don't want anything happening to you. I pretty much say the same thing to everybody at the end of every domestic that I go to, and that paperwork kind of segues me into it, right? Like, so they see, okay, here's your paperwork, here's the cop explaining that you should leave, here's him suggesting that you pack some stuff up while they're here, he's offering you a ride, and now that we have body cameras, we can get all that on body camera. Guapo says, do you have recommendations on drug training? If you can become a drug recognition expert, especially if you're into DUIs, I know you were talking about DUIs a lot earlier, Guapo. If you're into DUIs, becoming a drug recognition expert can really help. Right now, it's an emerging field of DUIs. It's starting to become big, where you can become the expert witness in your own case or in somebody else's case that this person was intoxicated by this particular drug without even having to do a blood draw. I'm not sure if that's true in the area that you're at, but if it is something that is available, that is a very interesting skill set, and it's a class that's good to have. Neighborhood tip. Neighborhood tip says, DRE training in your state. He says he went to a really good one last year in Indianapolis. Exactly. If you can become a drug recognition expert, that will open doors to you in testifying in court and in the types of investigations you can get yourself into, which are really useful. Many cases, back when I used to do dope cases, if you could find someone that was intoxicated and had small amounts or had paraphernalia on them still, and you could show to them that, like, no, I know exactly what you're on. I know what you're on. I bet you I know where you got it from. And you could talk them into giving you the next level of person's information. All right, I don't know how this entire stream went from filling out a contact card to talking about a drug recognition expert and DUIs, but it's all still applicable. There's lots of paperwork for DUIs and for 1050s, for motor vehicle collisions, and for everything else. It has to be filled out the same way. This is the same way you're going to be writing paper tickets. If you're writing paper tickets, it's the same way you're going to be doing domestic violence forms. If you're doing a domestic violence form, it's the same way you're going to be doing a tow sheet if you're still handwriting tow sheets. The only other thing to talk about is some of these are carbon paper, and for those of you that were born after the turn of the century, really dating myself, but if you were born after the turn of the century, these carbon paper forms, that's when you've got 3 forms and they're different colors and you have to put them down on a hard surface. You got to put that down on a hard surface and press hard to get through it. That's why they call old tickets, you hear old hats talk about calling them press hearts. Right? Press hard, 7 copies, that type of thing. You gotta press hard to get through the carbon paper. So make sure you actually press hard when you get a carbon paper form. So when somebody like me has to go back and check your work and it's the pink copy at the back, I can read what's going on.